Training martial arts and trying to figure it all out for yourself is a tricky thing. It's a paradox, really. On the one hand, you absolutely have to do your own experimentation, your own research, see what works for you and your body and your style of fighting. It doesn't matter if you're doing jiu-jitsu or kickboxing or stick fighting. The way that you ultimately end up expressing that art is going to be different from how I express that art. So there's absolutely room for learning the art and then beginning to dissolve the art and make it your own. On the other hand though, and this is what I want to focus on today, you can really end up in trouble if you don't absorb knowledge from other people, if you don't steal information from them, you don't practice it, if you try and remain insular. And I'll promise I'll get back to martial arts training here in a second, but imagine if you're going for a hike. You're there, you're at the foothills of a range of mountains, and you're like, I'd like to get to a tall mountain. And you just start hiking up the nearest hill, and you hike and you hike and you hike and you climb, and now you get to the top of that hill. And you're at the highest hill locally, but there are other mountains further away. And in order to get from where you are, which is the highest local peak, or if you want to use scientific terminology, the highest local maxima, to get to the other peaks, to get higher, you have to go down before you can go up again. You have to get worse before you can get better. There are ways that you can figure out martial arts that'll work in the short term. A great example of this are jiu-jitsu guys who develop ways to tap white belts. I used to train with this guy. He had one submission. He was big, he was strong, he trained all the time, he was motivated. His submission was to get on top in mount, wrap both forearms under the neck, and then squeeze as hard as he could and basically use a combination chest pressure into the front of the face, pulling pressure into the back of the neck to do this neck crank. It was very painful. I never got caught in it. The reason I never got caught in it is because I watched other people get caught in it. And I was like, there's no bloody way that that's happening to me, and I figured out a counter. So when I finally got in that position, I knew what I had to do. So this is a great example of a submission that works against white belts repeatedly, but against anybody higher than that, blue belts or purple belts, they're quickly going to figure out counters. They're quickly going to figure out how to stop you from getting to that attack, because it's not a high percentage attack, and how to stop it if they get caught in it. And the funny thing is, this guy trained for years, and he trained often, and he never made it past white belt. My instructor refused to promote him because he had no other attacks. If he'd started combining it and finding other ways to submit people, spending a month working on taking the back and rear naked choking someone, taking the back and bow and arrow choking them, or arm barring them, he would have added more techniques to his arsenal. He would have been more deadly overall. To go back to the mountain climbing analogy, he would have come down off of his peak by focusing on other techniques other than the one that kind of sort of worked. By focusing on other techniques, he would have become less effective in the short term. His skills would have dipped. His ability to tap most of his classmates out, which are white belts, would have gone down because he would have been working on taking the back, and he would have been screwing that up, and he would have been fighting his way through that process and figuring out the nuances. And then eventually, he would have started climbing. He would have gone from his local maxima to maybe a higher maxima, right? The next mountain peak. And eventually you keep on going. Every time that you add a new technique to your game, you're going to get worse before you get better. You're going to get worse before you get better, and that's totally normal. Another great example also comes from jiu-jitsu or self-defense, is when you tell people about the guard, and you explain to people you're on your back and your legs are guarding your head. Your legs are the guards of the castle, your head is the castle. You don't want to let attackers come through and take out the head, take out the king of the castle. This is the king of the castle, the legs are the defenses. So what almost always happens is they lie on their back and they start kicking, right? They're trying to create more distance. And they kick, 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 kick. And now they're so tired that it's total child's play to pass the guard, get them in a bad position and hit them. That kick, 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 kick strategy is a local maxima. It kind of sort of works. It keeps you out of trouble. And I'm not saying there's not a time to use that. There is a time to use that. But at some point, you're going to have to abandon that and go, okay, I'm going to work on guard retention as opposed to just frantically pedal kicking all the time. Meaning I need to work on foot position, I need to work on getting my hooks, I need to work on hip motion, I need to work on framing. And during that time, you're going to get worse, not better. You're going to have people close to you and your brain's going to be going, yeah, but they'd be able to punch me from here. It's true. You are somewhat vulnerable in that moment. But believe me, if you get so tired kicking, and I pass your guard, and you don't have a way to answer that, instead of taking one glancing shot, you're going to eat a whole bunch of really, really bad shots. You got to come down off that local maxima and get up. I've also seen this in swimming, of all things. I've seen athletically talented people trying to figure out treading water on their own. And they kind of develop a method where they kind of sort of keep their head above water. But if you look at it biomechanically, they're doing a whole bunch of things wrong that are going to make it exhausting. If they actually had to tread water for 10 minutes, they would drown. So trying to figure it out from first principles, trying to figure it out on your own, not seeking instruction, can be a problem. You could end up with a way to sort of kind of tread water that'll work for 5 minutes and then you're exhausted and drown. Or you could take the additional time to fine tune it, to not try and figure it out on your own, to go and absorb the knowledge that's totally available from your instructor. And if not from your instructor, then from YouTube. If not from YouTube, then from a blog. And if not from a blog, then from instructional videos. Any topic you want. Somebody out there has done research on it and probably is willing to share it. Probably is willing to teach privates, willing to teach seminars. You can go seek out people and ask them. You can find the best person that you know at XYZ. Boxing footwork. Who's the best guy in town for footwork? And go do a private with them. And you'll learn more in that half hour than trying to figure it out from first principles yourself. So there's a problem with trying to figure it all out by yourself. Like I said in the very beginning though, this is a paradox. Because of course you have to also then figure stuff out on your own. Nobody's going to hand it to you on a silver platter. You have to find out what works for your body. You have to find new ways of putting stuff together. So it's really both is the answer. Take as much information as you can in, especially now. If you're doing martial arts nowadays, you have zero excuse to not vacuum cleaner up information, then use it in the crucible of your own training. Figure out what works for you. And what works for you right now is going to be different from what works for you in a year or 2 years. There were techniques I learned that I completely wrote off. I'll probably link to one of them. There's a stupid technique that I knew would never work in real life. And then one day I pulled it off in competition. The very first time that I ever pulled it off was not in sparring, it was in competition. So I discarded that, like that was a fluke, that's never going to happen again. Never trained that technique again. The second time I ever pulled it off was in competition. So at that point the universe was busy telling me something. It was telling me, hey dumbass, this technique works. That's an example of a technique I would have never arrived at on my own. But because I was taking information in and then trying my best to process it through my own sparring, through my own research, through my own training, with training partners, big guys, little guys, flexible guys, inflexible guys, young guys, old guys, big guys, small guys, trying to figure out what works. Sometimes you go down the wrong path. I was on the wrong path not thinking that technique worked, but as an example of taking information in from the outside, putting it through your own research, and then personalizing the martial art at the other end. If you try and figure this all out, you see people trying to figure out grappling from first principles. Well, I watched the UFC and me and a buddy, we went down to the garage and we did this MMA stuff. That's great. It's absolutely great. It's better than doing nothing. But what I always recommend to people, if you're trying to learn something on your own or just learn it with a training partner or a couple of training partners, a garage gym, is once in a while, go and train at, quote, a legitimate gym. Make the 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour journey to the largest, best gym close to you. We can go and train with high level guys and really get a calibration. Because you don't want to be king of your local little hill when you could be king of the mountain. Come down off your local maxima, look for the global maxima.